to introduce, well, she'll introduce herself, Dr. Jean Bolen.
I'm Jean Shinoda Bolen, and I'm a psychiatrist and a Jungian analyst and an activist. And my name was, as an author, was connected with Goddesses in Every Woman as a classic that came out in the 80s, mid-80s. And it was a psychology of the feminine. It was about the archetypes in women based on the patterns as related to the Greek goddesses. Interestingly enough, though I had meant it to be a psychology of the feminine, it became a text used by individual women and circles of women as a text for women's spirituality and goddess spirituality, because the images touch something quite a bit deeper than thoughts about archetypal patterns. People had dreams as they put altars together, and the object that they naturally chose happened to reflect what is archetypally true for them. There was this deeper side, and they drew me in to women's spirituality. I really started out as a spiritual person, certainly, but the whole realm of the sacred feminine was foreign to me, because the sacred feminine is not part of the Judeo-Christian Muslim world that I was raised in as a Protestant Christian. So maybe that helps explain something of the sense of over time, the growing realm of the sacred, including the difference between transcendent spirituality, which is the Spirit, the God the Father, the invisible transcendent experiences of spiritual, which I certainly did know something about, but to find that there was a whole realm of the sacred that had to do with embodied, that had to do with coming through the bodies of Mother Nature and women, that it is in matter, which is a word from mater, mother, matter, and to have a sacred dimension to that is a whole new way of looking at things. The reason for ecology and feminism and sacred feminine and circles has something to do with 3 years ago. I had struggled to save a beautiful Monterey pine tree in what I considered my front yard. And then walking across the entry deck with the tree overhanging it and into the house, I found the place that when I went into that house, I felt I could live here for the rest of my life. And it included that tree. The tree was somehow part of the whole thing. I didn't realize that because it was part also of a homeowners association, that the house, the property I actually owned, was practically what the footprint of the house was, and the tree that was in my front yard actually was on commons. And that tree had been there before any of the houses had been built there. And the house next door remodeled and had glass against on the window side that faced the tree. And the politics of a homeowners association is that a perfectly healthy, good tree could be voted out of existence if there was enough political energy to make that happen. So for over a year, first I didn't take it seriously, actually. I didn't believe people could vote to execute a perfectly good, beautiful tree. But it happened that they did, and then I delayed its execution and hired a lawyer and did some things like that. And essentially I got to the point where, short of tying myself to the tree or climbing up into it and refusing to come down, which is not me. I may be an activist, but I'm not that kind of an activist. I think that the kind of activist that I am goes very well with young people who in fact climb up in trees and are willing to do that. That it is a natural alliance between the young people who recognize what it is that has to be done right now, and older people like me who can carry some influence as a voter and a taxpayer with what is usually the local governments. And so what happened anyway is that I lost and I knew that when I went off to the CSW, that when I came back, the tree would be cut down. Now, I had the fantasies of a demonstration, and maybe because of the scheduling, maybe there were some other people who thought I might do something drastic as well, but I didn't. I came to the CSW knowing that when I returned, the tree would be down. I was doing a workshop at that time on imagining a fifth Women's World Conference. But 2 years ago, 2 conferences ago, it was called Envisioning a Fifth Women's World Conference on Women, and Gloria Steinem was one of the speakers. And I told Gloria, who's a friend, what the saga of the tree and how I lost it. I lost the struggle for it, and the tree would come down. And she said to me, "Remember, Jean, you are a writer, and writers can have the last word." And that was the seed idea that led to the book, Like a Tree, How Trees, Women, and Tree People Can Save the Planet. Because what I understood about the people who could vote down the tree was that there's a difference, a world of difference, between what I call tree people, and there's something sacred about the beauty of trees and landscapes and the planet. And a not-tree person sees a tree as a thing that could be cut down for lumber or cut down because it's getting in somebody else's view. It's a very different attitude. And coming to the CSW, it's very clear when I hear about trafficking and learn about how girls are treated, that a not-tree person is someone who doesn't see the sacredness or the rights of all of the living things that are around us, whether it is an old or ancient tree or whether it's a young woman. A thing that could be sold, cut down, is an object, not something in relationship with the people. So that was the genesis of what has led to writing Like a Tree. In the process, I learned about trees, and I learned what they did, and I learned about how we would not even be here but for the trees. That essentially there was this time 350 million years ago when we had all of the forests of plant life. They grew very large, but they did not have woody trunks. It was 290 million years ago before the first tree that was efficient, that put out roots so the wind wouldn't blow it over. And how trees, as most of you know, take in carbon and methane and lots of other toxic substances in the air and transform it through photosynthesis into the oxygen we breathe. And that the roots break up the clay and rocks and help make soil with the organicness of the leaves that drop down into it. That we would not be here. That it is because of the oxygen in the air. It's because the air was cleared of noxious stuff so that the sunlight would come down. And so there's all kinds of reasons why trees and we are related, and how the life of us on this planet is very much dependent on whether the trees continue. Whether the trees today at the event at that wonderful event at the General Assembly celebrating the launch of UN Women, Donna Goodman, who is on the panel, introduced me to Wangari Maathai. And she is the first African woman to win a Nobel Prize, a Nobel Peace Prize, and won it for her Green Belt movement. And it was all about planting trees. And essentially where we are today is that we cannot sustain life here unless we bring some kind of balance. If we have not enough trees and too many people, it just won't work. And for all the climate change conferences we have, nobody talks about how women must be given reproductive rights in order to raise healthier children and less children. And if we have too many trees, not enough trees, and too many people, that is a prescription for an end of this beautiful planet and its survival. People. A tree person is somebody probably, well, a tree person values trees. I'll climb them, probably has a sanctuary or favorite tree in mind, knows it got cut down. We have 3% left of the magnificent redwood forest that once existed there. When you think about not tree people and tree people, there's that whole area of the mystical, psychic kinds of connections to the trees themselves. And one of the sense of the sacred, that symbolically, there are sacred trees. Whether it's the world ash or the Christmas tree or the Bodhi tree, there is some connection in our collective unconscious between the trees, the sacred trees, and ourselves. So I traced this whole dovetailing weave between my activism for women on one hand. I mean, the fact that the CSW was meeting and I was learning what was happening to girls in a positive, and what girls could do. This was also when I was being introduced to the idea of the girl effect. And then when girls are educated, what they bring to their villages, what they do for their families, that the need for girls to make contributions to this world, on one hand, as trees make these contributions to this world, and both are considered not of much worth and treated often. So that's part of the ecological side. But I actually feel the indigenous folks have always had a sense of, and that is that we are all one, that we are part of this earth. We are all interconnected. And what happens to life on this earth happens to us. And so the ecology and feminism and the sacredness has, for me, a kind of interweaving. As a Jungian analyst, the archetype of meaning is referred to as a large S self, which you can call whatever it is that is greater than your ego, that you tap into and know that it's in some way energizes and provides a spiritual base of meaning to you. So whether you call it God or Goddess or Tao or oneness or the great mystery, it's what human beings have always felt in, as far as we can see, with a sense of, human beings have had a sense of awe and a capacity for worship. That's why 40,000 years ago there were paintings on walls that humans would go deep into the earth to create these paintings in the south of France that move us still. That they are imbued with a sense of the meaning that those early folks had for those animals, primarily, that they painted on the walls. So one might say that one thing that is different about Homo sapiens is that there is a sense of awe that is potentially what we are capable of feeling. And that then is a source of deep meaning for us. And in the world of science, in the world of technology, in the world of left brain patriarchy, that whole dimension is not considered very important at all. And yet, it is what may make the difference for us saving ourselves and this planet, that we acknowledge that we have a sense of sacredness, connectedness, oneness with this place called home, Mother Earth. And it calls on us to be activists, but activists from the sense of the sacred feminine feminist and mystical activists. This is what a potential tree person is. An ecologist who is also a mystical activist. That the trees are giving this message to humanity, and some of us picked it up. And if you have one, then you are a tree person, and you are related to me